Father Grayson Heenan, third Sunday of Easter, April 26th, 2020. Falling again and rising. Dear brothers and sisters, our quarantine sojourn continues, and we join two disciples on their sojourn on the road to Emmaus in this Sunday's Gospel. Once again, our familiarity with the story might be our worst enemy in that it may conceal from us certain crucial details. One such detail is that the two disciples, Cleopas and another unnamed disciple, were likely abandoning their faith and hope that Jesus was the one. They are leaving their fellow disciples behind in Jerusalem, even as curious and unexpected turns are happening there. Possibly they are returning to their home or their former way of life. As they tell their fellow traveler, the up to this point disguised Jesus, but we were hoping that he would be the one to redeem Israel. Can you sense the sadness and disappointment in this line? They are deflated, crushed. Jesus had not lived up to their expectations. It is these very people that Jesus intercepts on their journey of going away, of departing the faith. Even as they are in the midst of a kind of moral failure, if we could even call it that, turning their backs on Jesus and his community, Jesus steps in. I hope this tells us something about God. He pursues, he doubles back, he strategizes. A failure for us is an opportunity for him. When we fail or when we sin, God does not turn his back on us. He begins to scheme to win back our faith and trust. Here is an image for us to contemplate this week. God, the traveler, on the road, scanning the horizon to meet us on the way, to raise us up. And so, the fundamental Christian pattern is set before us. Again we fall. Again we are raised. I hope this reminder zeroes in on the judgment we might all have buried deep in our inner sanctum. The judgment that says, I am a failure. This has all the telltale signs of coming from the Prince of Lies, the accuser. He wants us to believe the failure, to think that all our successes conceal the real truth below of the failure that we are. The truth is that we all fail. The lie is that all we are is a failure. Think of how much this pattern, falling and rising, repeats itself in the gospel and in the practice of our faith. In the Stations of the Cross, Jesus falls 3 times. 3 times he gets back up. It's the only thing that repeats itself in the Stations. Consider that. Consider Peter, who features in all 3 readings this Sunday. In the first reading, he is the speaker in this account from Acts. In the second reading, he is the writer of the letter. And in the Gospel, he's the one to whom Jesus appears as it's announced at the end of the reading. Peter's falls and failures are famous, both before the resurrection and even after, as a later story in Paul's letters to the Galatians has Paul publicly correcting Peter over a sensitive matter in Antioch. And yet Peter is far from a failure. He is a man raised, born up by his faith and hope in the God of Jesus Christ. If you want proof of this, reread the passage of his letter from our second reading today. Even on the human level, it is so helpful to remember that even the best athletes lose games, the best directors make bad films, the best comedians have sets that bomb, the best lawyers lose cases, the very smoothest of characters have embarrassing stories. We are not our failures. Our failures can even form and shape us for the better. But the Christian faith goes even further. It teaches us that all judgments of failure and success are transformed in the light of the gospel. Consider this, something I read just recently in the spiritual writings of Herbert McCabe. He writes, "For the cross was Jesus' prayer to the Father, to effect what he had failed to do, to effect it through his loving acceptance of failure. And the Father's answer to that prayer was the resurrection, Christ's resurrection and ours." The cross might be the greatest failure of all time, but in the eyes of faith, it is the greatest triumph of divine salvific love. This time of quarantine has placed us under tough conditions. I would not be surprised if all of us have experienced some kind of fall or failure over the last month and a half. But have faith. Jesus is on the road, ready to meet you, ready to raise you up. Continuing to pray for all of you, falling again and rising. Yours in faith, Father Grayson.